On Friday, Kevin and I went for a bike ride. It's the first bike ride I've taken since we moved back to Denver. And there's not trails, like the Cold Creek Trail is not right out, right near our house. So I'm a little nervous of a bike rider anyway, a little jittery. And we had to ride on the street. And our plan was to go to Littleton on the Platte River Trail, which is a bike trail, so it's no cars, and go to Breckenridge Brewery, have a beer, and come back. And that was the plan for Friday afternoon. Only we left too late. And we start going, and there's all these detours, and there's all these twists and turns, and we had to be on the road and for a portion of the time. And Kevin rides up alongside me and says, "Are you having fun?" And I said, "Somewhat." I couldn't wait to get to that beer. I wanted a beer. It was all about getting to the destination for me. We almost got there. We went about 13 miles, and we realized the time and said, it's going to be dark when we go back if we stop and have a beer now, so we better just turn around and go back. So we turned around like, when it's all about the destination, something in me shifted when we turned our bikes around and started going back. It was no longer about getting home then, or the destination. It was about the journey. It was about the fun of riding my bike. I had missed that the whole way there. I had missed it because there were detours, and there was sharp turns, and there was construction, and the path was closed, and I had missed the joy of riding my bike. And so often in life, we think it's about getting to that next thing, instead of, it's about the journey. It's about having fun on the journey. It's about being playful on the journey. It's about letting the wind blow through your hair and taking in the sights and enjoying this beautiful, gorgeous fall day, unseasonably warm. And I had missed that the whole way there. And so often, Christmas seems to be like that. We prepare, and it's about getting to Christmas, instead of about the journey and what Christmas means in our lives. Today is the first Sunday of Advent, and I almost forgot to light our Advent wreath. So we're going to do something a little traditional here, lighting a candle on our Advent wreath. There are 4 Sundays in Advent, and the first Sunday represents faith or trust or hope. Now we're going to go away from tradition a little this year and talk more about the expanded Christmas story. But it takes faith. It takes building that trust to be on a spiritual path, to live a spiritual life. We don't know what's coming. Part of that is exciting, and another part can be fearful, like I was on my bike ride. I didn't know there were going to be detours. Well, guess what? Life has detours. Life is never as we plan it to be. There's always going to be some stumbling block, something coming along. So this year, we're looking at the bigger Christmas story than just the night of Jesus' birth. We're starting today with looking at King Herod. And, in the Bible, there are 2 Christmas stories, actually. A lot of people don't know that. Only in the Gospels according to Matthew and the Gospel according to Luke. And they're different. They're different accounts of the same story. So what does that tell us, other than they're not maybe perhaps factual? That there's greater meaning in these stories for us? That it can be a metaphor for our lives? That when we look at it metaphysically, it can give us some guidance? Show us more what life's about? We're calling this the road to Bethlehem. And I wish I would have had this foresight to say the road to Bethlehem and back instead of just the road to Bethlehem, because the story doesn't end at Bethlehem. The story continues, just like our lives don't end when we get to a certain destination. They continue. We're following a book by Hypatia Hasbrook called The Trip to Bethlehem. We have a few in our bookstore if you want to follow, but we're not following it sequentially. We're kind of jumping around. And the road to Bethlehem, this trip to Bethlehem, is an inner journey. It takes twists and turns, just like life does in that picture you're seeing. But the spiritual path, the spiritual life is about seeking aliveness. And for most people, that means getting some meaning, that life has some meaning, that there's a higher power in our lives. And that connection to that higher power means we're connected to each other. It's about the journey, not the destination. It's about play and living life and living our potential and coming into greater awareness that we are divine beings. And not everyone will accept this challenge, will accept this way of life. It requires us to transform. It requires us to take risks. It requires us to do things that we're not accustomed to doing and stepping out of our comfort zone. And so many times we don't want to do that. Many are chosen, but few are called, it says in the Bible. We're all given the invitation, but not all of us will answer that invitation. So we want to set the stage today for this greater story, and having the Mideastern music was perfect in setting the stage because this all takes place in the Middle East, in Judea, where the Jewish people are living under Roman rule. And the Romans have appointed a king who wouldn't have been king by birth over the Jews, but he was more of a puppet and did as the Romans wanted him to do. It's King Herod. And King Herod was selfish and corrupt and evil and all about himself. He was, if things didn't go his way, he would have temper tantrums. He would kill people, torture people, including one of his wives and several of his children. He was the typical egocentric person, where it was all about him. No other view, no other perspective was welcome or acknowledged. Things went his way, which was Romans' way, the Romans' way. King Herod lives in each one of us. We each have a King Herod in us. In Unity, we teach that all the stories, all the characters in the Bible represent an aspect of our consciousness, represent an aspect of us. So each character we can find in our own consciousness. We don't often like to hear that, especially when it's someone like King Herod who we're talking about. But that resides in us. This wanting our own way, only wanting to see our view. Being selfish is all within us as well. Now also, we're looking at the road to Bethlehem. Bethlehem is one of the few cities from Jerusalem. Jerusalem metaphysically means place of peace, peace of mind. And most roads to Jerusalem went up, meaning we had to raise our level of consciousness. You have to raise your consciousness level in order to get to that peace. But Bethlehem was just a little bit higher in elevation, which means the birth of the Christ has to be, you have to go a bit more than having peace of mind. To birth a new awareness. So the birth of Jesus represents this birth of new awareness of our divine nature. When we get to Bethlehem, which metaphysically means house of bread or house of sustenance, we have everything we need. We are fed, we are nurtured. But before we get there, we have this King Herod experience. We have this place of darkness. And most of our information that we have on King Herod did not come from the Bible. If you go to those scriptures, you're not going to see a whole lot about King Herod. It comes more from a Jew named Josephus, who wrote Antiquities of the Jews, which was a history of ancient Palestine. And this is where we get all the information we had about Herod and how he was a puppet king and how he built monuments to the Roman rulers of his time. He also actually built the Jewish temple. But he represents this egocentric view of things, worldly view. Also, Herod means heroic, but he will make heroic attempts to protect himself, just like we do when we feel threatened. We will do everything we can to keep ourselves safe. And Herod had a very long reign in Judea, meaning it takes a well-established ego to lead a spiritual life. We have to be clear in who we are in order to be able to go through the transformation that's required of a spiritual journey. So Jesus was born into this time period, this period of a strong worldly power, that the Jews were pushed down. The world didn't want to let go of its grip, or the Romans didn't want to let go of its grip, of its power. So the first stage of this journey, when we're taking this road to Bethlehem and back, is to release some of that egocentricity that we find in ourselves, to release those things within us that are holding us back from seeing the light. We have to let go of its grip. It's not easy to do. We often want to just stay where we're comfortable, stay where we're in power, where we feel empowered. But we want to free ourselves to being more open, more accepting. That's that first stage of a spiritual journey. Spiritual journeys are often about letting go, as we had 7 weeks of surrender that we talked about this fall. It's about letting go to uncover what is already there. The divine, glorious, brilliant, dazzling self that is in each of us. But we have to let go of this hold that King Herod has on us, this power of release. And when we do, then we can catch a glimpse of the sun through the clouds. Catch a glimpse of the sun, S-O-N as well. Catch a glimpse of that dazzling light as the wise men did. And the wise men, actually, they saw the star before the conception. In the Gospels, it talks about the wise men seeing the star and traveling that night. But the wise men actually caught this glimpse of the star before that. And the wise men, or wise women, represent the combined wisdom. It says there's 3 of them, but the Bible doesn't say anywhere there's 3 of them. It just says there's 3 gifts. But 3 meaning the whole of it. They represent the magician archetype to us, that being able to look for the good in challenging situations, being able to balance the world view and the spiritual view. That's the wise men, wise women. And they see this light, this bright light. They're the only ones that can see it. It's spiritual aspiration. With wisdom, with discernment, we are able to see a greater view than without it. And so they have this conviction that there's this Christ nature, the star out there, not outside of themselves. It's all within us. And we travel to that place. And where do they see it but in the east? The east represents new life. It's where the sun comes up. So whenever someone's traveling east in the Bible, it's going towards a spiritual life, moving towards a spiritual life. So they catch a glimpse of this before Jesus is even conceived. This is using our power of wisdom, our power of discernment, our ability to discern, to see the good in the King Herod consciousness, to know that there's more than just what's the appearance of. This week, Richard Rohr did a great series on archetypes using Carl Jung's archetypes. And if you are into Richard Rohr, I suggest going to his blog from this past week. They were really good. But in one of them, he talks about how this discernment, this power of discernment is when we first hear spirit, or we first hear the divine speaking through us, it'll sound like our own voice. Because it is. It's us. It's within us. But we need to use that discernment to start learning, to start getting clear on, is this my higher self speaking or is this my smaller self speaking? It takes spending time in contemplation, time in meditation. Recognizing the difference between that voice of spirit and that voice of the smaller self, the ego. When the ego feels threatened, it will do all it can to keep itself safe. The wise men had gone to Herod and said, "We saw this great star." And they guessed its meaning was that the king of the Jews, the actual king of the Jews, was to be born. There was this longing to see that. Herod, of course, felt threatened by this. Because what does he do afterwards? He has all the babies, 2 or younger, killed. He's very threatened by having a real king of the Jews. Metaphysically, is this how we need to protect these new ideas? As we have a birth of a new awareness, it's it's vulnerable. Anytime we've had an aha moment and we share it with someone that doesn't believe, what happens to that awareness? It could be put down, it could be questioned, and our doubts creep in. So we want to protect this new awareness from the inner Herod. Because inner Herod will always want to save itself. So look at your own life. In what part of your life does Herod lurk? This Herod is within us. And where are the wise men or wise women? Do you have some glimpse of a greater potential in your life? Are you ready to take that spiritual journey? And maybe journey it doesn't resonate with you. For me, the whole patriarchal religion that I grew up with, Catholicism, how everything was him and he and male, didn't resonate with me. And what resulted, and I've just become aware of this recently, is where my feelings of unworthiness have come from. Living in a patriarchal family, patriarchal religion that I loved, that there was something missing there. And that was allowing the divine feminine to have a voice. I recently read an article called In the Image of God, Godde. God, spelled that way, is an Old English way of spelling God. It's also a feminine way of spelling God. And when you read it, it gives you there's just a pause. Because it causes you to think. It causes you to step back from the embedded God that I have in my embedded theology is a masculine God. But just seeing it as Godde is like, oh, there's more to this God. There's more to this divine than the masculine. Any group or any identity that was marginalized growing up may feel that to let go of their Herod maybe doesn't mean to let go of pride or arrogance or selfishness. Maybe letting go of Herod, for me in particular, is letting go of unworthiness, letting go of self-contempt, letting go of feeling invisible, not having a voice. That's getting rid of Herod for me. For each of us, it may be different as to what that Herod represents, what identities, what aspects of ourselves we identify with. Also in this article talks about, rather than describing the spiritual life as a journey, describing the spiritual life as home. That we don't have to go out and leave a place where we feel safe to have a spiritual life. What if the spiritual life was home and it meant that you could have a place that was safe enough for nesting, a place safe enough to give birth, to grow a garden, to create beauty, make things welcome. Maria Harris, in this same article, talks about that the spiritual life is not a linear movement to a specific destination. For some, it's a dance, it's a circle. It's going in and out of the circle. Is that the hokey pokey, you know? But, you know, whatever imagery works for you when you're thinking about a spiritual life, let that be okay. It doesn't have to be a journey. It doesn't have to be a destination. It doesn't have to be a male god. It can be G-O-D-D-E, the divine, whatever word you want to use for that higher power. Whatever you need to heighten your consciousness. Let that be okay. Let that imagery be okay for you, that we're all different. What the important part is to seek a spiritual life. And that means seeking aliveness, releasing identities that hold us back from that aliveness. There's a book by a neuroscientist, Andrew Newberg, and a therapist, Mark Robert Waldman, and the book is called How God Changes Your Brain. And I love this. They talk about how that we are hardwired to have a connection with our higher self. That there's places in the brain and circuits in the brain that are there, that not everybody will connect with them, not everybody will use them, but each of us has this ability. It's just like our 12 powers that we teach in Unity, that we're always using them there, but we may not use them consciously. And so in their book, they talk about the benefits. Why would we want a spiritual life anyway? Why would we want to leave our comfort zone? It's not easy. It's much easier to be comfortable and safe than it is to lead a spiritual life that requires transformation. What they say is this: not only do prayer and spiritual practice reduce stress, but just 12 minutes of meditation per day may slow down the aging process. Now, who wouldn't want that? And if you're in this room or you're watching online and you don't want that yet, you will. Contemplating a loving God rather than a punitive God reduces anxiety and depression and increases feelings of security, compassion, and love. Yeah. Fundamentalism in and of itself can be personally beneficial, but the prejudice generated by extreme beliefs can permanently damage your brain. I'd never heard that one. Be more open. Intense prayer and meditation permanently change numerous structures and functions in the brain, altering your values and the way you perceive reality. And most people are happier when they have a purpose in their life, when they have meaning in their lives. They go on to say that yawning heightens consciousness and relaxation. So go ahead and yawn. You have masks on, I can't even tell. And if I could tell, it wouldn't matter, because I would just say, oh, they're heightening their consciousness. But what makes you feel most alive? Where are you seeking aliveness? What are you willing to release to attain that aliveness, that feeling, that energy of aliveness? What are you willing to let go of? This Christmas season, allow yourself to travel this inner journey or this home, to find that aliveness within you, to bring it into the world and spread it with good cheer. I want to leave you with a quote that was in Richard Rohr, one of Richard Rohr's blogs this week, but it was written by Brian McLaren. It was on Thursday, on Thanksgiving, actually. He says, what we all want is pretty simple, really. We want to be alive, to feel alive, not just to exist, but to thrive, to live out loud, walk tall, breathe free. We want to be less lonely, less exhausted, less conflicted or afraid, more awake, more grateful, more energized and purposeful. We capture this kind of mindful, overbrimming life in terms like well-being, shalom, blessedness, wholeness, harmony, life to the full, and aliveness. The quest for aliveness is the best thing about religion, I think. It's what we're hoping for when we pray. It's why we gather, celebrate, eat, abstain, attend, practice, sing, and contemplate. When people say, I'm spiritual, what they mean, I think, is simple. I'm seeking aliveness. Seek aliveness. So somebody who's seeking aliveness in a new way at the end of the year is our own Carol Hoskins. And Carol is retiring at the end of the year. I want to ask Carol to come up here and the rest of the staff to come up here. We want to spend a moment honoring Carol as she is looking at a new way of being. No, Jeannie? Jeannie's not here. I think Jeannie's working. We forgot Jeannie was downstairs and Janice is on vacation, but we are so grateful for you, Carol, and all that you have brought to this community, all that you will continue to bring to this community. I know you've been here a long time, 25 years or so?
More than that.
More than that. And we have been so blessed by having you here, maintaining the history for us and the communication efforts and sending out all those important emails, and we're going to miss you. And I know that you're not going far, that you will still be here. So we thank you. Thank you so much for all that you've given this community. I know it means a lot to you, and you mean a lot to us. So thank you.
So I've been with the church 17 years, and I think it must have been about my second year, right, that you interviewed? Yeah, so I said to Carol, I was kind of thinking that I would be hiring someone a little younger. And she said, I'll prove you wrong.
What I love about Carol is that she's been part of the community for so long, and when she was hired as administrator, you just felt the love that she has for this community and that she has for New Thought. And it just has been overflowing. And as we grew and we grew and we got more and more complicated, it became clear that we needed somebody more, but it was, it was hard to do. I was on the board at that time, and it was a hard thing to do. And what I love is that Carol said, I'm not going anywhere. Yes, I get it, because this is a lot, and I want to be part of this community. This is my home. This is my family. And without any resentments or frustration or hardship, she just said, how can I be of service? And she has done that every single day that you've been at Columbine. Mm-hmm. And again, she's retiring, and she's not actually leaving. She's just saying, I just want one less thing. Let me say one
other thing too. Have we ever met anyone more positive?
No.
No. Carol comes in, that was fabulous, to everything we do, which is wonderful. It's been a bright spot for us.
Thank you. Well, I've been here, the first time I think I came to Columbine was 27 years ago, when we were still at the junior high. And I loved Rachel's talk 2 weeks ago on our 28th anniversary when she talked about the history of Columbine. Well, I've been here through most of that history. I remember when we hired Scott. I remember when we broke ground for this building. And the first time we had a service here, I want you guys to imagine this. There was no roof. There was a cement floor. we had a service the sun was shining, it was hot as heck. And we were sitting in chairs that we brought from home. And I remember the first Sunday when the choir stood up here and sang On Holy Ground, which still makes me cry whenever I hear that. So I have been here since long before I was hired as administrator, and I will be here long after I retire from the staff. And mostly I want to thank the staff, fabulous staff we have, and all of these people up here and the people who aren't up here. And I just want to say that one of the core values of Columbine is community. And this is my community, this is my family, this is my home, as Sue was talking about, and I'm not going anywhere.
So we have out on the patio a beautiful memento, a thank you gift for Carol, and it has a big mat, and we would love for every single one of you to give Carol a blessing on that mat so that she can hang that in her home and always know how much we love and appreciate you, Carol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And with that, let's bring up Pete.